Gillian, you are in Washington. Great to see you, by the way.
You too.
You're in Washington every single day. Are you stunned between the Tapper book, where he suddenly realizes that Joe Biden might not have an A game, to this? Is this the bigger surprise?
That's a good question. I hadn't thought about that. I will say, look, everybody's got to make a buck, right? Why are you hating on them? I'm just kidding. No one. I forget. I mean, people can't see my face.
Yeah. But you're being sarcastic. But you're just saying, for the longest time, she told everybody that Joe Biden has been great, and now she says, in The Independent, the story of the broken White House.
Broken White House. But
what?
At the same time, Brian, so she wants to now separate herself from everything that happened the last 4 years, but she also wants to do it without criticizing the president or too many of her former colleagues. And it's like, this is one of the most public figures, political figures in America, right? This was the face of the White House for 4 years, or not the entire, most of the 4 years. If you're going to then break with the administration that you represented, you got to have a real good explanation. You can't wake up and say, well, now I'm going independent. What does that mean?
So I'll give you an example. If Joe Manchin said, I'm going independent, I go, all right. If you have John Fetterman says, I'm going independent, I go, well, kind of makes sense. There's nothing middle of the road for her, because I watched her on MSNBC, and you probably did too. You probably could see some cuts of her. She's like the squat. I mean, she's way to the left. So to be independent now means that you're going somewhere or running from something to find a new home. Do you see some of the anonymous quotes about what kind of job she did and how she was? People did not respect her inside the White House, let alone the press corps.
There was massive consensus, right, in Washington that she was not only was she not great in her role, but she was nowhere near as good as Jen Psaki had been. And there was that unfortunate, you get compared
to
really
your
predecessor.
Jen Psaki was excellent.
Right. The thing is, she never explained her own. We know about Jen Psaki, right? And it's not just because she has her own show on MS now. We know a little bit about her story and her family. Karine never once, not even in those like Vogue interviews that she did or Vanity Fair or whatever it was, talk about how she sees the world and how she wants things to be. And
exactly.
So it's like, okay, she's going independent, but it's like, I guess that makes as much sense as anything else about her, because we have no idea.
Exactly. I mean, what she was...
We don't know what she stands for.
Remember she told us her first day, what made her special? Black lesbian first. All right, that's what you wanted to stand you out, that old identity politics, which she's welcoming. Mark Halpern offered some analysis today, cut 5.
There's still a lot we don't know. And so I hope she adds that historical record. Amazingly, the officials who are identified in the Tapper-Thompson book as being involved with the attempt to cover up. I don't call it a cover up because there was nothing to cover up. It was all on C-SPAN and Fox News. Those officials haven't reacted. Now, I haven't seen them quoted anywhere explaining their position. Now, as you know, some Republicans in Congress would like them to come up and testify. And if that happens, maybe we'll get more of the truth. But I'm all for her adding to the historical record. But if she doesn't acknowledge what everybody in America saw in real time about Joe Biden's decline, I think it's going to be difficult for her to argue that this book's got credibility.
That's just it. I don't get what her position is. If she's going to be like Jill Biden and say her husband's fine, all right, but nobody thinks that. And Anita Dunn tried to get rid of her. Jeff Zients tried to get her another job. Other people thought she did a terrible job defending President Biden. Had to look at her binder because she didn't know the issues. You know this because you had a job in the State Department. You know what people's like when there's staffers who get the issue even better than the principal. She was the opposite. I think Jen Psaki could have set policy.
There's even, yes, exactly. She could have been and probably was, like Dana was to President Bush, a policy advisor, right? I mean, you start trusting your press secretary's judgment so much.
Ari Fleischer, too.
You're then and Ari, of course, yeah. She did not follow that model. because as we are now learning from reporting that came out yesterday, more details today, she was very consumed by her own sort of PR profile while she was doing the White House job. Apparently she got in trouble with colleagues for including her like PR rep that she hired, somebody in New York, including them on emails that she was sending from her official government email with other White House staff talking about White House business. I mean, she was working hard to try and get her own name out there at the same time she was doing this. So actually, in that perspective, the book's not surprising. Also, I think it was Jesse yesterday made an amazing point, which is like, okay, you don't write a book this long in, how many months is it now since the administration? February, March,
10 weeks.
You don't write a like 300 something page book in that amount of time. So she was working on the book while she was still working at the White House.
Although Tapper claims that he started the book in November, but who knows?
Well, I guess if you have a ghostwriter, but she didn't decide in the last 3 months that she was going to go independent and write and get a publishing deal for an entire book.
Gillian Turner with us. Gillian, what is the problem with John Kirby? And evidently they did not get along. This is an admiral, the new military. You had a hostage situation, the Afghanistan situation, the Hamas the horrific attack. You needed a military expert there. What was the problem?
Well, so the story goes that everybody knew that, what you just said. Everybody recognized, we need a face in here who, put it this, first of all, the White House wanted to replace Jen Psaki only with a woman. So they picked Karine for the job, understanding that she was going to work in tandem with Kirby, right? Like whenever there was a big story or whenever there was anything relating to national security, foreign policy, the military, he was going to step in. And this was agreed to ahead of time. But then as this played out, Karine did not want that. She did not want to share the podium with him. And so she made a concerted effort within the White House with staff to kind of push him out whenever possible. And, those briefings suffered when he needed to be there and he wasn't there.
All right, let's talk about another area. First off, how long were you in the State Department? Is that where you were? I was a staffer at the White House in the National Security Council 4 years. The last 2 years of the Bush administration, the first 2 of Obama, because I was not a political appointee, so you keep going. I worked in the State Department only before my current job where I'm covering it as an intern for 6 months, full-time. It was like my junior year of college. I took off a whole semester to go work there full-time. Who's your supervisor?
And they were like,
anybody I would know?
A guy named, well, this is going to date me, but it was at the end of Colin Powell's tenure as Secretary of State. No joke. The person who I reported to is a diplomat named Mike Kozak, who's been around a long time. He might even still be at State now. He's like a career ambassador. He's been to like 10 different countries. So I had a foot in the door at State before I started covering it, meaning like I know how things work and I know how, how everything goes down, how the sausage is made.
So when you see what's going on with Ukraine right now, and the State Department's got to do some work, but you have a guy running the State Department who's also the National Security Advisor. At the same time, you got NATO summits going on. You have trade talks happening. Let alone the border issue. This is pretty amazing what's on Rubio's plate, right?
It is super interesting. I'm borderline obsessed with the fact that he is now in these 2 roles, and he's the first person in forever to do this. I asked Tammy Bruce, this was on the record, like maybe 2-3 weeks ago, because I've only been back from maternity leave like 3 weeks now. So sometime in the last 3 weeks.
Second child.
I asked Tammy, like, how does he feel about this? Because it's been unclear, right? Like if he was gung-ho for this or if he was kind of dragged into it. And she said, honestly, Gillian, he's joyous. Those were her words, joyous at doing both jobs. He loves it.
He's also an archivist, too. They say that...
And he's the archivist. And, Brian, he just, in case anybody's, keeping tabs on him, he's over at the White House every day. He comes over to state to, do what he needs to do, greet, foreign dignitaries when they arrive, have meetings, but he's at the White House. He is very focused on the president.
Which is interesting because they say when Kissinger did both jobs, he was never at the White House.
Right, exactly.
It was the opposite.
Yep.
So, I thought Mike Waltz did a great job. I'm a big fan. I think he's going to be an impact player, UN ambassador.
Same.
And is so knowledgeable, knows the military, knows diplomacy, worked for Cheney, did his own housework, Green Beret.
I think it's the White House's loss that he's not there
I still
every
don't
day
get
anymore.
What do you think the story is there?
Well, so some people have been saying all along, this is not going to work because, we all know Mike Waltz from our air because as a member of Congress, he came and talked to us all the time. He's a foreign policy hawk on Russia, on Putin in particular. My point being,
Iran.
on Iran, on Ukraine and Russia, he knows that Putin's a bad guy. He knows what side the United States is on. He doesn't exactly align with the MAGA folks on all the foreign policy issues.
Neither does Rubio, though.
It was a little, right, exactly, which is one of the reasons I'm so obsessed with Rubio's role in this administration is how is he making all of this happen? The president loves him.